Hey horror fans, welcome back to Room 237, coming at you with another Golden Age horror film. I know I've been doing Herschel Gordon Lewis reviews. I have two up already. But I found this movie on YouTube, and it's one I've been wanting to see for quite a while. Damn eyelash right in my way. First off, quick announcement. I'm sure everyone in YouTube knows all about this shit going on with Kappa. And I got my own opinions and tons of questions like everyone else. I'm probably going to make a video tomorrow just discussing my thoughts and the ambiguity of this channel. But I just ask for your support until then, and we'll see what happens when Judgment Day comes. But anyway, that's not for this video. So yeah, I've been doing Herschel Gordon Lewis, the godfather of gore. But this is a movie that I've not been able to find on DVD. Again, I don't shop online. But YouTube has a shit ton of old classic horror movies, especially in the public domain, which I believe this is. It is 1932's The Old Dark House, starring Boris Karloff. It was released by Universal, so it's produced by Carl Laemmle. Released in 1932, but it didn't do very well when it came out. I mean, it made money, but poor word of mouth. And then for years, actually, Universal lost the rights in 1957, and it had at least two remakes. The big one was in 1963, which I'll talk about, and this movie was thought to be lost forever, but it was found in a vault in 1968, a Universal vault, and it was restored. At least part of it was, and you could kind of tell what they had to work around, which is one of my problems with the film, which I will get to. But one of the biggest pros of this would be it's directed by James Whale, who of course directed Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. The ensemble cast, I mean, Boris Karloff did get top billing. I mean, I think this was his first movie after Frankenstein. So even on the cover, it just says Karloff, like he was already a massive star. And even during the credits, when it opens, it says the players, he got top billing as Boris Karloff. But his role is very minimal. Like, it's actually kind of disappointing. But aside from him, you have Gloria Stuart, who was also in The Invisible Man. Other people know her as the old lady from Titanic. This was Charles Laughton's first film, who, of course, he would go on to marry Elsa Lanchester, the Bride of Frankenstein herself. And also stars Ernest Thesiger, who played Dr. Pretorius in Bride of Frankenstein. So, all the way around, I mean, you working with really great stuff. And it's based on the novel Benighted from 1927 by J.B. Priestley. And this, it is considered a horror comedy because the characters are very quirky. And even some of the stuff that happens with the characters is sort of out of nowhere. And but at the same time, it's also known as one of the first gothic horror films. Outside of, like, Dracula, Frankenstein, like that kind of stuff. I guess in the more contemporary setting. And I think it's also the first movie of its kind to have this kind of horror cliche setting. Uh, you know, lost, either lost or car trouble. This one's lost. Rainstorm, seeking refuge. You go to this house that you find, and you encounter its weird inhabitants. I mean, we would see this in movies all the way from Rocky Horror Picture Show, somewhat Chainsaw Massacre, but not really, to House of a Thousand Corpses. So it's a cliche that's been done from one end to the other. So it's like a horror comedy mixed with like the gothic, creepy house genre. And while I was watching it, I kind of likened it to like House on Haunted Hill, which is another tongue-in-cheek horror comedy directed by Hitchcock's rival William Castle, which fits because the remake for 1963 was directed by Castle. So that version I haven't seen, but I've been wanting to see this for quite a while. And ultimately, I would say it's a good film. I'm not sure which I like better for that year between Old Dark House and The Mummy, which Karloff's role in this is more akin to Frankenstein than The Mummy. He pretty much got typecasted in this film. Just a mute, lumbering brute. That's pretty much what he is. He doesn't even speak. He barely grunts, which is unfortunate because his talents are wasted. But he bounced right back with The Mummy later this year. So, and that, I think that was the first time he was credited as Karloff the Uncanny. So you got a group of people. You have this guy Philip and his wife Margaret, played by Raymond Massey and Gloria Stuart, and their friend Roger, played by Melvin Douglas. They're the ones that, out in a rainstorm, they're lost. They seek refuge in this country house. Takes place in Wales, and they come across the Femm household for the Femm family, where you have Horace, played by Ernest Thesiger. And I liked him in this. I mean, I loved him as Dr. Pretorius. And he's the same. Well, not really the same because he's not a mad scientist, but, the same kind of, I guess, prissy attitude. And prissy isn't my word, that's his words talking about Pretorius in an interview years later. But they used makeup on him to make him look like really creepy, kind of like the door guy on Rocky Horror Picture Show, which I'm not a fan of. That's why I haven't reviewed it. I haven't seen it in years. I'm not a fan of Rocky Horror. But, they use a lot of like white makeup and like dark eyeshadow and like around his cheekbones. So he has this really like almost old Peter Cushing look, like sunken in face. And his sister, Rebecca, who is sort of like this God-fearing woman. And their butler, Morgan, is an alcoholic brute, played by Boris Karloff, who, he acts like Frankenstein's monster, but he looks more like how he does in the beginning of The Raven. Like, he's got like the bangs and the beard. And kind of like weird like stares with his eyes. It almost makes him look like he's looking in two different directions. And it really does suck because it only sucks because he didn't have enough screen time. He could have done the character well, even if he doesn't speak or really do anything. But if he had, there's like a couple times where he adds a little bits of emotion, and he actually gets to act and do something. And of course, Karloff is my favorite horror actor. He's my favorite horror icon. So when his talents and screen time is kind of diminished, it's very disappointing. Uh, there was one scene when the sister Rebecca shows the Gloria Stuart character a room for her to change in. And she tells her about how, she thinks she's godless and sinful, and that her 102-year-old father is still living in the house upstairs. And this is when you get some interesting camera work, because it's like a vanity, like, mirror, then like the two that fold out mirrors. You get these weird angles, like where like her face is distorted because of the mirror. It's like she's laughing, but it's like the laughing like starts over every cut from like a different mirror. I thought that was interesting. Eventually, more people show up. This other guy, Porterhouse, played by Charles Laughton, and chorus stage girl, Gladys, played by Lillian Bond. Excuse me. And I guess the comedy comes in because like the friend Roger and Gladys like fall in love, but like it's just kind of weird because like at the very ending, after everything that's happened, he just proposes out of nowhere and they just met. She says yes. Um, there's and pretty much for the first like half hour, 40 minutes, not much happens at all. But then you find out that um, the eldest sibling of the Femm family, Saul, who was played by Bremmer Wills. I've actually never heard of him. But, he's like a pyromaniac obsessed with fire, and he keeps trying to set the house on fire. And that's basically the second half and third act of the film. Is just, I guess, chaos, but it's still very low key. Like he takes wood from a fireplace, like runs around, and there's like a party. Saul, what did he even fall off of? Because watching it on YouTube, like my Wi-Fi isn't the best, even though it's a 50 something inch TV. The quality was really bad, and I've seen stills of this movie. There are prints of it that look good, so it's not the restoration necessarily. It's just my Wi-Fi. So it was kind of hard to tell what was going on at some points, but Saul, he falls off something like a landing, or like the upper floor that looks over the lower floor. I think he falls. You do get a scene, from what I could make out, is Karloff holding him and sort of crying, because he's cared for this family for so long. That's like the little bit of Karloff you get to see. Other than that, he's only in a couple scenes, and it's just like up closes of his face, and just kind of walk. He's like a taller version of who he is in The Raven, basically. And I don't know if this was part of the restoration. This was another one thing I did have a problem with. I don't know if it was part of the restoration or just other camera work, like the mirror stuff that James Whale was doing. But there's like a part where Karloff, and I can't remember who it was, are sort of like facing off. And the camera keeps cutting. It's like diagonal, but you only see from like here up. Like that much. It's very weird angles, and you don't get to see much. Again, I don't know if that's the restoration or the actual film itself. And then the next morning, it's like nothing happened. The sun's out, people leave, some people stay. Ernest Thesiger, it's kind of like Kim Basinger. Like, how the hell? I keep wanting to say Thesiger, but there's no N. And that's at the very end when the one guy who's been flirting with this girl, start a relationship, he proposes and she says yes. Feels really random. But no, it is. I do see. If I do see the comedy, it's really dry. I would have liked it better if it was just a straightforward gothic, like creepy house movie, creepy family, creepy house movie. But I did like it for what it was. It did remind me a lot of House on Haunted Hill. I'm eager to see what Castle's version would be, since he did do House on Haunted Hill. I do feel Karloff was wasted. And no pun intended, because he is an alcoholic. There's a part where he goes nuts and like flips the dinner table over. But I think his talents were wasted, which is unfortunate. But the little bits you do get of Karloff, you can always count that he's going to deliver, and he does very little that he gets. Or he does with the very little that he gets. But I would say, I thought it was a classic. I do see that as sort of one of the forgotten of Universal films. It's not what people talk about very much. Also, 1932 was the year White Zombie came out, which isn't Universal, but the Old Dark House is Karloff, White Zombie is Lugosi, and they're both just kind of. And actually, oddly enough, Karloff is pretty much playing Frankenstein's monster again. White Zombie, Lugosi's pretty much playing Dracula again. So, 32 was sort of those two films was sort of like their sophomore efforts after hitting it big. Playing the same character again. But I would say I liked this more than White Zombie. Did I like it more than The Mummy? I don't think so, because Karloff really did get to shine, and that was like the first time Universal actually let him speak and do something. But I liked this movie. There's no music. I liked that. I don't know if it was because it was 32 and they still. Because I know at least for Dracula, they didn't have music because they weren't sure how to get dialogue and score on like the same track or whatever. Frankenstein, I don't know if it was the same thing or if it's just what James Whale thought was more moody. This movie works just as well. There's no music, and in fact, there's just a constant sound of rain and thunder and wind, which does help set the mood and add atmosphere, so I liked that. But other than that, I mean, it's a 72-minute movie. 73-minute movie. The first half hour, 35 minutes, nothing happens really. It's all pushed to the second half, and it felt more like a film with a concept that wasn't mastered yet. Yeah, I guess that's what it is. It's like they hadn't got the House on Haunted Hill kind of concept. Even though House on Haunted Hill and this are very different. Between stranded and, staying at a house to win money. But, weird house, weird inhabitants, people have to deal with it. But anyway, The Old Dark House, I'm glad I finally saw it. I did enjoy it. So, anyway, The Old Dark House, thank you for watching.